a cool oasis in the middle of a harsh desert. That's how I would describe opening up a Persona menu for the first time. When you tap the menu button in Persona 3 Reload, the protagonist head dives into the screen, as if they were taking a dip in a lake, transitioning the color palette to a light blue on white. The protagonist follows you around wherever you go. Skills menu gets his gun ready. Stats menu, holding a glass shard as you flip through your party members, replacing his eyes with theirs. All while the soundtrack plays in the background, leaving you floating in its own way. With either fast-paced drums to rattle off the walls or a midnight serenade to ease you into a calm mood. Persona 4 Golden feels a bit more nostalgic nowadays, taking things back to the age of cable television with a vibrant set of colors to put a pause on any action. Blocky menu options that should be obtuse somehow aren't. Instead, they make you feel as if you are flipping through the channel guide late at night, feeling a sense of relief when you finally stumbled your way over to your favorite program, or in this case, info like what gear you have equipped or ability to compare. Songs like Heartbreak loop on and on while you explore, reflecting the feeling of small-town childhood innocence. Persona 5 Royal smashes the menu in your face literally, taking the themes a little further by mirroring the game's premise of thievery, living on the outskirts of society, and donning a new mask to play your role. The black on red sets a mischievous tone, along with the lettering that's been cut out of a magazine as to hide the author's identity, all while our protagonist glides around the menu with ease, always on the run, complementing the ambient soundtrack that exudes a smooth jazz found in noir thrillers, something they would play in a movie as the detective sips cheap coffee at their favorite midnight cafe. I'm a sharpshooter at Ghost Masquerade, hiding both. Though all these are nothing more than just menus and soundtracks. Sure, they hook you in, but it's the expertly crafted locales that reel you. It's always such a delight to simply exist in Persona games. Wherever you are, expect to be drowned in charm as you walk from place to place, port to port, and city to city. Persona 3 has its respective big city standards like the cozy Iwatodai dorm, bustling Gakauken High School, and my favorite, Halloween Mall. Persona 5 carries that over with an almost never-ending amount of stuff to check out, like the massive Shinjuku Square with an underground mall, to the more quaint stuff like Café Le Blanc. Though for me personally, Persona 4's town of Inaba truly takes the cake as it perfects the small-town rural vibe in not only a nostalgic but comedic way. The so-called shopping district, which would normally be something monstrous in size at a big city, is no more than a single street in Inaba. I happen to really like its humble design that it shares with the rest of the town, such as the neighborhood floodplain in Yogami High. I love that the entire town's favorite pastime is to simply hang out at the in-game equivalent of Walmart, since that's the most exciting thing in Inaba. Sure, the visuals don't really hold up nowadays, but it adds to the nostalgia in my opinion, as Persona 4 is a literal PS3/360 game. But don't mistake Inaba's size for a lack of fun. Every Persona game has activities for you to do, such as play video games, watch a movie, sing karaoke, eat at a restaurant, work part-time jobs, or chill in a bathhouse. While all of these just more or less involve you watching your character move around with no interaction, they all do increase something called social stats. For example, if you spend your day in a cafe, your charm will increase. If you decide to spend your evening working as a translator, it will increase your expression, or helping clean up will increase your kindness. Though there is a catch. The core of Persona revolves around the calendar system, as days will naturally pass by during activities. For example, after school you could go down to the batting range to practice your swings, improving proficiency. After that, the game will transition into evening, so you decide to grab some grub at a restaurant, improving guts. Then you go to bed and start all over again, meaning you only get 2 chances per day to complete activities. It seems simple at first, but you only have a limited number of days, usually around a year, to max everything out. It gets really tricky when most activities are only available during certain times of the day, on certain days of the week, certain months in the year, or even only during certain weather conditions. So you have to really manage your time wisely and not slack off if you want to get the most out of Persona games. Because social stats aren't just for kicks. They all give you certain benefits, such as a high knowledge level will give you good scores on exams, which warrants combat rewards and a big boost in charm. Though most importantly, they dictate whether or not you can progress Persona's central gameplay element, social links. While you could just rush through the main story of every Persona game and come out the other end with a very enjoyable experience, you'd not only be giving yourself a dumbed down understanding of the major themes, but completely missing out on the amazing character writing through social links. Social links are essentially friendships that you form with characters outside of the main plot. Oftentimes when a side character is first introduced in the main story, I'll usually find them pretty bland or at worst, genuinely annoying. Initially, they don't really jive with the rest of the group or fit in with the main themes of the game. Though through their social link, I come out appreciating what makes them tick as they begin to trust and open up to the protagonist. Suddenly the feeling of resentment does a complete 180, and now I can't imagine the narrative without them. That's Persona when the character writing is just okay. So when I say it excels, I mean it really excels, as some of the social links I consider better written than the entirety of the main stories. They're essentially the reason I play Persona and manage to stay completely invested all the way through until the end without fail. Though once again, social links come with a lot of stipulations that you have to look out for. For starters, there are 10 levels per se for each social link that you have to unlock to reach its conclusion. You can level up by learning enough social link points based on how well you converse with said character. It requires you to really think about and try to break them down as people, in order to understand which answer or phrase they would respond best to. Usually though, it's pretty simple. Just don't be a jerk and say something funny. Still, sometimes these characters can be hard to read, especially at first. So you might not say the right things at the right time, which means leveling up is far out of reach until you have enough SL points by hanging out with them. This usually consists of the protagonist and the side character going to grab a bite to eat or something, which gives you SL points but a very measly amount, so prepare to strap in, because that level up is not coming anytime soon. Though that's the easy part, as any action involving a social link will progress time, and characters are only free to hang out at certain times, just like activities. Some are available all the time like the main cast, so they're pretty easy to deal with, but there are elusive ones that are only around at the most inconvenient of times. This makes it hard to decide who to hang out with, especially since there are around 23 social links in each game, making it near impossible to finish every single one of them in the limited amount of time you have. I haven't even gotten to where those activities come into play. Almost all social links require you to reach certain levels in social stats, like Mitsuru in Persona 3 and Naota in Persona 4, requiring you to have max level intelligence to even talk to them. Then there are others like Mikoto in Persona 5, who at first requires only level 3 intelligence, but halfway through she just switches up, and suddenly you need to max out your charm in order to continue. So you gotta weigh your options. Should I spend my days doing activities to raise my charm as fast as I can and risk not completing other social links? Or cut your losses and decide to move on since you're on a tight schedule? At first I really hated having to make decisions like this, since it felt like Persona was punishing me for trying to experience the story it tells. Though eventually I started to relish in it, as the game gives you plenty of tools to help you manage your time responsibly. You're the one who just has to put everything together. At first, it can be overwhelming to have to fit your activity times, sports schedules, work availability, social links, and mandatory stuff into a single week. But once you manage to get everything down, Persona games give you a realization that just makes everything click. Just like in real life, you have to juggle a lot of stuff day to day in order to barely keep afloat. Sometimes the world will just throw a wrench into your schedule, which could be as minor as a little rain outside, or as major as life-altering decisions you are not prepared for. No matter how much it sucks, you have to be able to balance things out, or how else will you be able to tell the good from the bad? How will you be able to relax if life becomes work? How will you be able to move on if you let everything grind to a halt? I also think that the social links are in the same boat. At first I was annoyed at the insane stat requirements to start some, and how long it took to get through one, and the many times it felt like I was wasting time by just hanging out, but eventually, I once again noticed how realistic they are. People aren't going to consider you a true friend the second you meet them on the street. It takes time to build up those relationships. It takes them time to open up and trust that they can tell you about their problems. Some have felt this trust with others before, people they thought of as true friends, only to be betrayed. So it's only natural for them to have their guard up, have certain expectations of how charming, or how smart, or how kind someone has to be before even engaging with them. Still, that doesn't mean that every interaction will be life-altering. Most of the time it will be a simple hangout, throwing darts, or catching fish. The emotional baggage comes later since you just enjoy each other's company. Once you understand this element of Persona, it feels so natural to just glide through these games that before you know it, hours have passed in the real world. That's when Persona becomes maddeningly addictive. You know you should put down the controller, but I'll just play one more day. What's the harm? You will repeat this mantra to yourself over and over again, as eventually in-game days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months. The calendar system will become like second nature to you, as completing a social link or leveling up a stat gives this feeling of satisfaction, paramount to completing a task in real life ahead of time. Like getting all of your homework done early so you don't have to do it tomorrow. Finding someone to cover your work shift last minute so you can do that thing that you wanted to do. Or finishing editing a video after 2 all-nighters. Though that's just the story and for your own benefits that social links give you. I haven't even touched the gameplay elements, and yes, I mean the actual gameplay of Persona. I have stated in previous videos that I despise turn-based combat in video games, though my opinions have really begun to change over the last year or so. I now realize it's not turn-based combat that I hate necessarily, it's stat-based combat. I've gotten to really enjoy games like Fear and Hunger and Baldur's Gate 3, which are examples of games that use turn-based combat as more or less puzzles. Sure, you could brute force your way through an encounter, but more likely you're going to end up dead. Instead, you're supposed to use all of your tools to your advantage, finding the enemy's weakness and exploiting said weakness. But I was nervous going into Persona since it's categorized as a stat turn-based game. This means that it's not really your skill that decides the outcome of a battle. It's do you have enough health, deal enough damage, and are carrying enough items to whittle a boss's health down to 0. If your answer to that question is no, well, sucks to suck. Because you have to spend the next 5 hours fighting the same enemy over and over again, until you think you're a high enough level to throw yourself in the ringer, get your butt kicked, and then start the process all over again. I know there are people out there who do enjoy the grind, but it's just not for me. I find the repetition annoying since I just want to get back to the main story. But even though they were all stat-based RPGs, I ended up loving those elements of the Persona games for some reason. And I think it all chalks down to the Personas themselves. In Persona, each of the main cast has their own, well, persona. Physical manifestations of their personalities. Think stands from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and you're right on the money. Every persona has a set of abilities that represent a different element such as fire, wind, electricity, etc., etc. Often one persona carries exclusively one type of element, meaning they have one key strength and one key weakness, as they are also vulnerable to certain elements from enemy damage. For example, Yusuke's persona, Goemon, dishes out ice damage, meaning he is resistant to getting hit by an ice type enemy, though if an enemy hits him with a fire attack, he'll get knocked out for a round. Luckily, you can flip the game on its head, as every enemy has their own set of weaknesses. At first when you're in a fight, it's a lot of guessing and checking, just throwing whatever element you can at the enemy. Sometimes it'll miss, sometimes they'll block it, and sometimes they'll just straight up deflect it back at you. But when you do finally find that sweet spot, you will not only stagger the enemy, but gain an extra turn, allowing you to tag in a party member who has a whole new set of abilities. They stagger the next enemy, tag in, stagger, tag in, stagger, and before you know it, all of your enemies are down for the count, allowing you to unleash an all-out attack.
So you know that we out there, swatting lights in the making, yeah, move fast without breaking, can't hold on.
It feels so satisfying to be able to just string the perfect sequence of attack together as animations, music, UI, and just everything comes together so perfectly it's hard not to fall in love. That's why I really enjoy Persona's turn-based combat, since it rewards you for thinking ahead of time and planning things out. Just like outside of combat when you plan your schedule out in free roam. Though weaknesses and staggering only really apply to base enemies, as when it comes to most story bosses, they don't have weaknesses, at least none that are easily apparent. So oftentimes you have to rely purely on damage and damage boosting abilities if you want to have any chance of beating them. In most other stat-based RPGs, this is where you would have to grind for 10 hours straight to even have a lucky chance. But Persona is different, thanks to the protagonist's ability to not only carry multiple personas at once, but combine them to make brand new, stronger ones with better abilities. Every persona is also assigned an arcana or a class, such as the Magician type, Justice type, Hermit type, and the list goes on. The real kicker comes in when you realize that every single social link is also assigned its own arcana type. So as you progress the social link associated with an arcana, the more rewards you unlock for that specific class, such as a massive boost in XP when fusing a new type of said persona, and the ability to unlock brand new ones as well. So basically in Persona, you still technically grind for XP, but not through combat, instead through hanging out with friends, working part-time jobs, and other simple stuff. I find this aspect of Persona really intriguing because every single element of these games just comes full circle, directly affecting each other in more ways than one, rewarding those who are organized and efficient, both inside of combat and out. In the end, Persona does it without really feeling too video gamey, most of the time. As I mentioned earlier, these games are stupid long, with the biggest entry so far, Persona 5 Royal, taking you 101 hours to complete. I do feel that the length is justified, as it keeps you entertained the entire time. It just sucks you still won't be able to experience everything. While it is possible to finish every social link and max out every stat in one playthrough, you pretty much have to follow a guide word for word telling you what to do every single day of the year, which response to pick for every single interaction, and at that point, are you really even playing the game? I don't really want to have to go through all 101 hours again just to do a social link I might not even enjoy. I just kind of want to sit back and vibe with Persona without feeling the need to open the wiki every 30 seconds to check whether or not X activity gets me X points. Especially since a pretty fair amount of these games are centered around taking risks and trying new things. Sure, this contradicts what I said earlier about a tight-wound schedule, but I feel like I shouldn't be punished for experimenting to find what I enjoy best. I mean, that's pretty much how the combat system works, just guessing and checking until the puzzle fits. I actually feel that Persona 3 Reload, the newest entry in the series, understood this, giving you plenty of time to wrap things up near the end of the game. So hopefully future entries will carry this philosophy forward. My other major gripe with the social links is the romance options. No, I'm not talking about some of the questionable relationships you can have, as that topic has already been done to death, to the point where you can tell that the developers regret it somewhat nowadays. So what I do want to talk about is the fact that the protagonist can't seem to have a friendship with a female social link without it turning romantic. From the very first interaction, all of the dialogue that earns you the most social link points are the ones where you flirt with them. So the game actively rewards you for pursuing something romantic, making it really crappy when you have to reject the girls after they ask you out. Especially since the dialogue options that are meant to be platonic answers make you seem like a straight up jerk. The romance also feels forced with a pretty decent amount of the cast as well, and only a slap on the wrist if you get caught cheating. Slight spoilers for Persona 5, but I feel Futaba is the worst offender. The game more tries to paint an older brother younger sister relationship with her, as you help her break out of her shell and begin to put trust in people again. So I was really disappointed when the game gave you the option to date her, which I declined. Though I later found out that if you do date her and cheat on her, not through my own experiences mind you, just want to clarify that, Sojiro, Futaba's father, who is extremely protective of her, helping you if she catches you in the act. I don't really get why, since it's incredibly out of character for Sojiro and crappy for Futaba, since her whole character arc is learning to trust people again. I know that it sounds like I'm yelling at nothing, I mean it's just a video game for Christ's sake, none of these characters are real, but Persona does pride itself in how realistically it depicts its relationships. So I feel that this is a major stumble and something that needs improvement in future entries. But gripes aside, I still have really enjoyed my journey through these games the past year. It's a series I never really thought I could even think about getting into based on everything that Persona is, much less every one of them I've played so far being some of my favorite video games of all time. I can't wait to see what is in store for the future of Persona.